All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A woman is folding laundry and preparing to put the laundry away. She spots her daughter walking into the kitchen and asks her daughter to put some socks into the appropriate drawer. If the daughter puts them in the right drawer, the woman reinforces the behavior. What type of teaching does this most resemble? So we have a teaching question. And as an RBT, the two primary teaching methods you want to know are naturalistic teaching and discrete trial teaching. Naturalistic teaching is also sometimes called incidental teaching. And these two types of teaching are kind of the umbrellas where everything else falls under. So if you're going to be shaping, if you're task chaining, however you're teaching, you're typically going to be doing it in one of those styles, either very controlled with discrete trial teaching or more natural with incidental teaching. In this case, we have a woman folding laundry and putting laundry away. So she's just doing her day-to-day chores. She sees her daughter walking in the kitchen and decides she's going to ask her daughter to put the socks in the appropriate drawer. And if the daughter does that, she reinforces the behavior. So, would you consider this more controlled, more contrived, more rapid paced, or would you consider this more naturalistic? Well, this is clearly more naturalistic because the woman is just going about her day and using that opportunity to teach her daughter where to put the socks or to comply or whatever she's working on. What type of teaching does it most resemble? A, discrete trial teaching. It doesn't necessarily resemble discrete trial teaching. With discrete trial teaching, we've got a very controlled environment. We're rapidly giving feedback and consequences, and we're doing it at a very controlled and contrived pace. We're not task chaining because we're not teaching individual steps. She just tells the daughter, put those socks in the right drawer. What it resembles is C, naturalistic teaching. It looks very natural. It looks very incidental. It's just teaching as a result of a naturally occurring situation. And then D, group instruction. Obviously, there is no group. It's just the woman and her daughter. The type of teaching it most resembles is C, naturalistic teaching. A behavior technician notices that their client has bruises on their arms and wrists, and it looks like someone had grabbed them firmly in those spots. The technician becomes worried. What should the technician do? Interesting question here, right? Because we are mandated reporters, meaning if there's abuse, if something's happening, we have to report it. We don't have a choice. However, you've got to be conscious and smart about how you approach this. You're going to meet a lot of different families, a lot of different children, and you're not always going to know the full situation of everything. And you can make a lot of assumptions that may or may not be true. In this case, the technician sees bruises on the client's arm and wrist and notices it looks like someone grabbed them firmly in those spots. Now, clearly some assumptions could be made about how those bruises got there and what might be happening. But we also have to remember this is a one-time thing. The technician doesn't know for sure what happened. They didn't see anything happen. They just saw what we would consider maybe a permanent product. So in this case, as a technician, what's the best course of action? A, report this to the supervisor immediately. Yes, we're not there yet where they should go immediately to authorities. They didn't see it happen. They don't know how it happened. We don't even know if this has happened before. So yes, we're mandated reporters, but here we don't have a lot of information to go on. Should they tell their supervisor? 100%. You should tell your supervisor pretty much everything because you are a team and they need to know these things. But B, report this to relevant authorities immediately. You just don't know enough yet. Had you seen something happen, that's a different story. Here, we just have this permanent product. We don't even know how it got there. C, report this to the Behavior Certification Board immediately. Well, the BCBA is not going to be able to do anything about this. They don't control the parents. They control us, RBTs and analysts. And then D, report this to the insurance company immediately. Insurance deals with billing. It deals with hours. They're not going to be able to help with this. What this technician needs to do, communicate with their supervisor first, and then let their supervisor go from there. If it continues, it becomes a different story, right? But in this case, we only have this limited amount of information. As the technician, go to your supervisor immediately. Your supervisor wants to measure the amount of time it takes for a client to begin their homework after being told to start. The goal is to understand the delay between the instruction and the start of the task to improve compliance. Which data collection method is most appropriate for this purpose? All right, data collection question. Pretty straightforward data collection question. We have a supervisor. They want to measure the time it takes for the client to begin their homework after being told to start. So if we have an SD of homework, and then we have this time in between, and then starting the homework, what are we measuring? We're measuring this section right here, time in between the SD and the response, because we want to know the delay between the instruction and the start of the task to improve compliance. Now, what data collection method is going to be best for measuring time in between the SD and the response? A, frequency. Well, frequency is a count. We're not counting anything here. We're looking at time. So frequency is not going to apply. B, latency says what? Latency says how long something takes to begin or to start or to happen after the SD. It's exactly what we're looking for. This is going to be our latency in between the SD and the response. We're measuring that time. That's our latency. We're not measuring duration. Duration measures the length of a response, typically, and we're measuring the time in between the SD and the response. So be very careful with your timing measurement procedures. Make sure you know what you're measuring. And then D, interval. Interval is a discontinuous measurement. Interval, we need to start an actual interval to measure, which we don't have intervals to measure here. We are simply looking at latency between being told to begin the homework and then actually starting that homework. So the data collection method most appropriate is B, latency. A student in a classroom often disrupts the day by making loud noises with their hands. To address this, the teacher decides to remove the student's access to their favorite activity for the rest of the day whenever the disruptive behavior occurs. To determine what type of consequence this is, we would need to do what? Actually, a pretty straightforward question if you understand consequences and how they affect behavior. How do we know consequences to affect behavior? Consequences change future behavior. Consequences are going to increase behavior, maintain behavior, decrease behavior, but always behavior in the future. If you have a student that is disrupting the day with loud noises, and as a consequence, the teacher removes students' access to their favorite activity, how do we know what type of consequence that is? How do we know the removal, what it does to the behavior? Well, we have to look. And in order to identify the consequence, we need to know how it affects the behavior. So A, we already know this is punishment because it is aversive to the child. That's not how we determine the consequence. For all we know, the disruptive behavior is continuing even after access is lost. And in that case, it's not punishment because it's not decreasing anything. You've got to look at the behavior change, not just what we're doing. B, we would need to look at how the current behavior is affected. We're not looking at current behavior. In this situation, current behavior already happened. The noise has already happened. Now we're looking at the consequence, which follows behavior and affects future behavior. C, we would need to look at how future behavior is affected. Perfect. Consequences affect future behavior. In order to determine what type of consequence it is, we would need to look at future behavior. And then D, we would need to ask the child how they felt following the consequence. You could, but it's not going to determine what type of consequence it is, because what the child says may or may not be accurate or fit with what actually happened to the behavior. Consequences are all about affecting future behavior. So that's what we're going to look to when determining what type of consequence is in place. Consider backwards chaining procedures that reinforce learners for completing the final step in a chain. When might it make sense to use a backwards chaining procedure? When we use chaining, you are typically going to use forward or total task chaining. It's just typically how we teach. Backwards chaining is an alternative given, given certain situations. When we think about backwards chaining, we are prompting a learner through the whole chain and then reinforcing for the final step. Why might we do that? What benefit would backwards chaining possibly have. A, when the learner engages in escape behavior. If the learner is prone to escape, this way we're going to help them through the whole task, and then their reinforcement is escape because they complete the final step and they're done with the task. So this is a good way to combat that escape behavior. B, when the final step in the task is the most desired. Sure, let's say we're making a meal, right? And when you're making a meal, a lot of times the best part is eating that meal. And so if the best step or the most desired step is the last one, backwards chaining might motivate your learner. And then C, when the learner struggles to begin a task independently, again, sure, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be prompting through all the beginning steps anyway. So we're going to be beginning the task with that learner, not making them do it independently to start. The only thing they need to do independently is that last step. So it might make sense to use a backwards chaining procedure for D, all the above. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. As always, work hard, study hard. We'll see you soon.